What if a single mom with a dream of a safe home for her daughter could stand up to an HOA president who believed her property was a blemish on a pristine community? Sarah Miller's life was a fragile tapestry of resilience, woven with the threads of sacrifice and an unyielding love for her daughter. At 34, she carried the weight of single motherhood with a quiet, relentless determination, her days defined by the ceaseless rhythm of survival. Her 8-year-old daughter Lily was the heart of her world, a bright, curious girl with a contagious laugh and a passion for drawing vibrant, chaotic pictures that spilled over with color, each one a glimpse into her boundless imagination. Sarah worked as a waitress at the Sunflower Diner, a weathered roadside stop off the I-5 in Southern California. Her days began at 5 a.m., serving coffee to truckers, pancakes to commuters, and forced smiles to customers who often forgot to tip. Her nights were spent stitching together a life for Lily, helping with multiplication tables, mending hand-me-down clothes with careful stitches, or reading bedtime stories about brave adventurers who conquered impossible odds. Every dollar she earned, every crumpled bill tucked into a mason jar, was a step toward a dream she'd clung to for 6 years, a home of their own. That dream became reality in a modest 2-bedroom cottage just beyond the towering iron gates of Camden Estates, an elite community nestled in the sun-drenched hills of Southern California. The house was far from perfect, its white paint peeled like dry skin, the lawn sprouted defiant patches of clover, and the front porch groaned underfoot, but it was hers. Sarah had signed the papers with trembling hands, the culmination of countless double shifts, skipped meals, and nights spent counting coins. She'd stood in the empty living room, Lily's small hand in hers, and felt a surge of pride so fierce it brought tears to her eyes. The cottage was a sanctuary, far enough from the city's noise but close enough to the diner for her grueling commute. For Lily, it meant a backyard where she could chase fireflies, plant marigolds in messy rows, and hang a hand-painted birdhouse in the old oak tree, a yellow and blue masterpiece she'd created with dollar store paints, her small hands streaked with color. For Sarah, it was a promise kept. A stable, safe life for her daughter, free from the cramped apartments, thin walls, and constant hum of their past. Camden Estates was a different universe entirely. Its iron gates, pristine villas, and meticulously trimmed hedges screamed wealth and control. Its residents drove gleaming SUVs, wore designer athleisure, and walked purebred dogs with collars that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. She didn't care about fitting in. Her 2008 Honda Civic, with its dented fender and faded blue paint, sat parked on the public street just outside the gates, a practical choice given her narrow driveway. When she bought the house, Sarah had meticulously checked the property lines and zoning laws, poring over the fine print with a real estate agent and a county clerk to ensure her lot was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. She kept a folder of these documents, tucked away in a kitchen drawer, as a shield against any overreach. She wanted no part of their rules, their scrutiny, their world. She just wanted to live quietly, to give Lily the childhood she'd never had, a childhood with a backyard, a bedroom, a sense of home. Veronica was the unchallenged monarch of Camden Estates, the HOA president who wielded her authority like a scepter. She was tall, with sharp cheekbones and blonde hair pulled into a flawless chignon, her designer heels clicking as she patrolled the neighborhood with her Bichon Frise Duchess trotting at her side. The dog's rhinestone collar sparkled as brightly as Veronica's icy, calculating stare. Sarah first noticed her during an evening walk with Lily, when Veronica's gaze lingered on her cottage. It wasn't a neighborly look, it was predatory, her lips tightening at the sight of the unmowed grass, the parked Honda, and Lily's yellow birdhouse swinging from the oak tree. Sarah brushed it off, chalking it up to the quirks of living near a gated community. But Veronica's stares became a ritual, her eyes narrowing with every pass, cataloging every imperfection as if Sarah's existence was a personal affront to her perfect domain. The signs of Veronica's attention grew more overt. Sarah found flyers from the HOA tucked under her windshield wiper, urging compliance with community standards, despite her non-membership. Notes appeared in her mailbox, printed on crisp letterhead, warning about aesthetic violations like her untidy lawn or unapproved birdhouse. Once, she caught Veronica standing at the edge of her property, taking photos of her yard with a sleek phone, Duchess yapping at a squirrel. Sarah felt a chill but told herself she was being paranoid. She wasn't part of their world. They had no power over her. Or so she thought. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she'd become the target of a woman who thrived on control, and who saw her modest home as a crack in the facade of her carefully curated empire. Veronica wasn't just a busybody, she was a force, one who saw Sarah's independence as a challenge to her authority, a blemish on the pristine canvas of Camden Estates. and she was prepared to do whatever it took to erase it. It was a humid Tuesday in late September when Sarah's world tilted. She'd worked a punishing double shift at the diner, her feet throbbing and her apron stained with coffee, ketchup, and the faint smell of fryer grease. Lily was at a neighbor's house working on a school project with her friend Mia, and Sarah was dreaming of a hot shower and a rare moment of quiet. The envelope in her mailbox shattered that hope. It was heavy, official, with Camden Estates Homeowners Association embossed in gold. Sarah's first thought was that it was a mistake. She wasn't part of their HOA. She triple-checked the property lines, the zoning laws, the fine print of her deed to ensure her independence. She kept a folder of these documents, tucked away in a kitchen drawer, as a shield against any overreach. She tore open the envelope and her breath caught. The letter was a legal summons, accusing her of violating HOA regulations. It cited her Honda, parked on the public street near the Camden Estates entrance, as an eyesore that devalued the community's aesthetic. It criticized her lawn for being unkempt, her house for failing to meet standards of upkeep, and even targeted Lily's birdhouse, its bright yellow paint deemed garish and non-compliant. The demands were staggering: a $12,000 fine for repeated violations, a mandate to join the HOA or face further legal action, and a chilling threat: failure to comply may result in the seizure of your property and relocation of its occupants. Sarah's hands shook as she read it again, the words blurring through tears. Her house wasn't in their jurisdiction. She checked, obsessively, meticulously, with a real estate agent and a county clerk. How could they do this? She pictured Veronica's smug face, Duchess yapping at her heels, and felt a surge of anger tangled with dread. She couldn't afford a lawyer, let alone a fine. The thought of losing her home, the one thing she'd poured her life into, made her chest tighten. She imagined Lily's face, her drawings ripped from the walls, her backyard taken away, her marigolds trampled, her birdhouse torn down. This wasn't just an attack on her property, it was an attack on her daughter's future, on the promise she'd made to give her a better life. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, the letter spread out like a battle map, her old laptop humming as she researched. She wasn't a lawyer, but she was resourceful, a skill honed by years of stretching paychecks, negotiating with landlords and navigating life's challenges alone. She scoured property records, zoning laws and HOA bylaws she found on a legal forum. She cross-referenced her deed with county maps, her fingers trembling as she highlighted key passages. She found a blog by a property law enthusiast, detailing cases where HOAs had overstepped their bounds and lost. She stumbled across a Reddit thread where homeowners shared stories of fighting back against predatory HOAs, their words a spark of hope. By 4 a.m., her eyes burning and her coffee cold, she'd confirmed her suspicions. Her property was outside Camden Estates' legal boundaries. The HOA had no authority over her. Veronica's letter was a bluff, a power grab dressed in legalese. But it was a dangerous one. The HOA had money, lawyers, and influence. If Sarah didn't fight back, they could bury her under legal fees and intimidation. She thought of Lily sleeping soundly at Mia's house, unaware of the storm brewing. Sarah's heart ached with the weight of it. She'd promised her daughter a safe home, a better life. Now that promise was under siege, and Sarah was the only one standing between her family and ruin. She closed her laptop, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for her house, she was fighting for her daughter, for their future, for the right to exist without fear. But the fear was there, gnawing at her, whispering that she was out of her depth, that Veronica's power was too great. Sarah pushed the voice away, clinging to Lily's words from a week earlier. "You're strong, Mommy?" She had to be. She didn't have a choice. The next morning, Sarah found another note in her mailbox, a second warning from the HOA, citing a failure to respond to the first letter and threatening to escalate the matter to court within 48 hours. The audacity of it ignited something in Sarah, a spark of defiance that burned through her fear. She wasn't going to let Veronica win. Not without a fight. She spent the day gathering more evidence, printing out the HOA's bylaws, emailing the county clerk for confirmation of her property's status, and jotting down every interaction she'd had with Veronica. She recalled a moment a month earlier when Veronica had stopped her on the street, Duchess in her arms, and said, "You really should consider joining us, Ms. Miller. It's better for everyone if we're on the same page." The words had seemed polite at the time, but now they felt like a veiled threat. Sarah wrote it all down, her anger fueling her focus. Sarah called in sick to the diner the next morning, a decision that twisted her gut. She needed every paycheck, but losing her home was a bigger threat. She dropped Lily off at school, forcing a smile as she promised a movie night later. "Be good, kiddo," she said, ruffling her daughter's hair. Lily grinned, oblivious to the weight on her mother's shoulders, her backpack bouncing as she ran to join her friends. Sarah watched her go, her heart heavy with love and determination. She drove to the county courthouse, her stomach in knots, clutching a folder stuffed with documents. Her property deed, zoning maps, a printed copy of the HOA's bylaws, notes from her research, and the 2 threatening letters. She wasn't sure where to start, but she knew she couldn't back down. At the courthouse, she was directed to a legal aid office, where she met David Ruiz, a soft-spoken attorney in his late 40s with kind eyes and a worn briefcase. David listened as Sarah poured out her story, her voice cracking as she described the letters, the fine, and the threat to her home. She showed him the summons and the second warning, her hands trembling. David took one look and shook his head. "This is nonsense," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your property isn't under their jurisdiction. They're trying to scare you into compliance. It's a classic bully tactic and it's illegal." David agreed to take her case pro bono, sensing there was more to the HOA's actions than a single overzealous president. He saw the fire in Sarah's eyes, the quiet strength beneath her fear, and knew she was fighting for more than just a house. Together they drafted a countersuit, accusing Veronica Camden and the Camden Estates HOA of harassment, abuse of authority, and attempting to enforce illegal regulations on a non-member. Sarah also requested damages for emotional distress, citing the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, and the fear that had gripped her since the letter arrived. It was a bold move, but David's confidence gave her a flicker of hope, a light in the darkness that had enveloped her. As they prepared for the hearing, David dug deeper into the HOA's history, and what he found was staggering. Public records revealed a pattern of complaints from homeowners, both inside and outside Camden Estates, who had received similar letters. Some had paid fines out of fear, others had moved to avoid the hassle. The HOA had collected over $150,000 in what David called extortion money, with no clear accounting of where it went. Veronica wasn't just targeting Sarah. She was running a scheme, using her position to strong-arm anyone who didn't fit her vision of perfection. David found a paper trail of questionable expenses, lavish HOA dinners at upscale restaurants, a new office for the board with custom furniture, a consulting fee paid to a company owned by Veronica's cousin, and even a $20,000 landscaping project that consisted of a single fountain installed near the HOA office. It was a small empire built on intimidation and greed. Sarah spent the next 8 weeks in a whirlwind of preparation. She met with David after work, poring over documents in his cramped office, her diner uniform still smelling of coffee and grease. She barely saw Lily, relying on her neighbor Mrs. Alvarez, a kind retiree with a knack for baking, to watch her after school. The guilt gnawed at Sarah. She hated being away from her daughter, missing bedtime stories, school pickups, and the little moments that made motherhood her anchor. At night, she'd tuck Lily in and tell her stories about brave knights and dragons, leaving out the real dragon she was facing. Lily sensed something was wrong but didn't push. "You're strong, Mommy," she said one night, her small hand squeezing Sarah's. Those words became Sarah's mantra, a lifeline in the chaos. David's research uncovered more than just complaints. He found emails between Veronica and her board, discussing problematic residents and ways to encourage compliance. One email, sent to a board member named Richard, read, "The Miller property is a liability. We need to push her out before others follow her example." Another, to a board member named Margaret, instructed, "Increase the pressure on non-members. We can't have their kind lowering our standards." A third email, chilling in its bluntness, outlined a plan to leverage legal threats, to force compliance, even from those outside the HOA's jurisdiction. A fourth email revealed Veronica's obsession with Sarah's property. "Her house is a symbol of everything we're trying to prevent. If we don't act, others will think they can ignore us." Sarah's blood boiled when she read them. Her home wasn't just a house, it was her life, her daughter's safe haven, her proof that she could rise above her past. And Veronica saw it as a blemish to be erased. David also reached out to other homeowners who'd been targeted. Mr. Patel, a widower who lived inside Camden Estates, shared how he'd paid $4,000 in fines for a non-compliant fence, only to learn later it was perfectly legal. The Garcias, a young couple with a toddler, described being pressured to sell their home after refusing to remove a basketball hoop. Javier, a single dad, told of a $3,000 fine for planting a vegetable garden, which Veronica had deemed unsightly. Clara, a nurse who lived 2 streets over, confessed she'd paid a $2,000 fine to avoid a lawsuit over her unapproved porch swing. Mrs. Kim, a retiree, shared how she'd been fined $4,500 for planting roses that weren't on the HOA's approved list. Mr. Thompson, a young teacher, revealed he'd been fined $6,000 for parking his motorcycle in his own driveway. Their stories fueled Sarah's resolve. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it was for everyone Veronica had bullied. Sarah began connecting with her neighbors, something she'd rarely had time for before. Mrs. Alvarez invited her for tea, sharing her own run-in with Veronica over a non-approved mailbox that had cost her $1,000. Clara started a weekly coffee meetup, where neighbors shared their experiences and began to organize. Javier offered to help Sarah fix her porch, his quiet kindness a balm to her stress. The Garcias invited Sarah and Lily for dinner, their toddler giggling as she smeared spaghetti sauce on Lily's cheek. Mrs. Kim brought over rose cuttings, teaching Lily how to plant them in the backyard. Mr. Thompson, the teacher, started a kids' art club, where Lily's drawings became the star of the show. These conversations, held over coffee in quiet backyards, or during school pickups, built a network of support. Sarah started a group chat with Clara, Javier, the Garcias, Mrs. Kim and Mr. Thompson, calling it The Resistance as a half-joke. But it wasn't a joke, it was a lifeline, a reminder that she was part of something bigger. The chat buzzed with stories, strategies, and the occasional meme poking fun at Veronica's rhinestone-clad dog. Sarah also faced personal challenges. The stress of the fight triggered migraines and she started losing weight, her already slight frame growing gaunt. She'd catch herself staring at Lily's drawings, wondering if she was strong enough to win. Her co-workers at the diner noticed her distraction, one of them, a gruff cook named Tony, slipping her extra coffee and a sandwich during breaks, saying, "You gotta eat, Sarah. You're fighting a war." Her manager, Linda, gave her flexibility with her shifts, sensing the weight she carried. But every time doubt crept in, Sarah would look at the group chat, read a message from Clara about a new ally, or see Lily smile, and find the strength to keep going. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her neighbors, for justice, for the right to live without fear. The hearing was set for a crisp October morning. Sarah dressed in her best outfit, a navy blazer from a thrift store, ironed to perfection, a white blouse borrowed from Mrs. Alvarez, and a pair of black flats she'd polished until they shone. She sat nervously in the courtroom, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart pounding like a drum. Lily was with Mrs. Alvarez, and Sarah had told her only that, "Mommy's fixing something important." Across the room, Veronica sat with her lawyer, Gregory Holt, a slick man in a tailored suit that screamed money. Veronica's face was a mask of confidence. Her lips pursed as if Sarah's presence was a personal insult. Duchess wasn't there, but Sarah could almost hear the dogs yapping in her mind, a sharp echo of Veronica's relentless control. Judge Eleanor Hayes, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, called the case to order. Gregory Holt went first, painting Sarah as a negligent homeowner whose unsightly property and careless parking habits were dragging down Camden Estate's value. He waved a stack of glossy photos showing Sarah's Honda on the street, her lawn with its patches of clover, and Lily's birdhouse, its bright yellow paint deemed garish. He spoke of community standards and property values, his voice dripping with condescension, as if Sarah's existence was a stain on the neighborhood's perfection. He suggested that Sarah's refusal to join the HOA was a deliberate act of defiance, a threat to the community's cohesion. He even brought up Lily's birdhouse as evidence of disregard for aesthetic harmony, holding up a photo for the judge to see. Sarah's heart sank. It sounded so convincing, so official. She glanced at David, who gave her a reassuring nod, his calm presence anchoring her. Then it was David's turn. He stood calmly, his voice steady as he laid out the facts. "Your Honor, Ms. Miller's property is not and has never been part of Camden Estates. The HOA has no legal authority to enforce its rules on her. This lawsuit is baseless and an abuse of power." He presented the property records, zoning maps, and a survey of Sarah's lot, all clearly showing her independence from the HOA. He pointed to the county's zoning laws, highlighting the clear boundary line that placed Sarah's property outside Camden Estate's jurisdiction. He cited legal precedents, including a 2018 case where an HOA was fined for overreaching its authority, and a 2020 case where a homeowner won damages for harassment. The courtroom was quiet, the judge's pen scratching notes, her expression unreadable. But David wasn't done. 10 minutes into the hearing he dropped the bombshell. "Your Honor, we've uncovered evidence that Camden Estates has been systematically violating local property laws for nearly a decade. They've sent illegal fines and threats to dozens of homeowners, both members and non-members, many of whom paid out of fear. We have complaints, correspondence, and financial records showing that the HOA, under Ms. Camden's leadership, has been profiting from this scheme. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Veronica's face drained of color, her confident mask cracking. Gregory Holt whispered urgently in her ear, his composure faltering. Judge Hayes leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Mr. Ruiz, are you alleging fraud?" "Yes, Your Honor," David said, his voice unwavering. "And we have the documents to prove it." The evidence was a bombshell, a meticulously compiled arsenal that shook the courtroom. David presented a thick folder of complaints from other homeowners, some dating back 9 years. There were emails from Veronica to her board, instructing them to apply pressure to non-compliant residents. One email, sent to a board member named Richard, read, "The Miller property is a liability. We need to push her out before others follow her example." Another, to a board member named Margaret, instructed, "Increase the pressure on non-members. We can't have their kind lowering our standards." A third email, chilling in its bluntness, outlined a plan to leverage legal threats to force compliance, even from those outside the HOA's jurisdiction. A fourth email revealed Veronica's obsession with Sarah's property. "Her house is a symbol of everything we're trying to prevent. If we don't act, others will think they can ignore us." There were bank statements showing over $200,000 in fines deposited into the HOA's account, with no clear record of how the money was spent. Most damning was a letter from Veronica to a former neighbor, threatening to foreclose on their home if they didn't pay a $15,000 special assessment for a community project, a project that never existed. Sarah watched, stunned, as the courtroom absorbed the revelations. She hadn't just stumbled into a personal battle, she'd exposed a web of corruption. Veronica wasn't just a control freak, she was a predator, using her position to extort money and power. But the twist went deeper. David revealed that a whistleblower, Ellen Carter, a former HOA board member, had come forward with a bombshell of her own. Ellen testified that Veronica had targeted Sarah specifically because her house, sitting just outside the gates, was a visible reminder of what Camden Estates couldn't control. In a recorded board meeting, Veronica had called Sarah's property a blight on our brand, vowing to make an example of her. Ellen, who'd resigned in protest, had kept audio recordings and emails that captured Veronica's vindictive tone, her voice dripping with disdain as she described Sarah's cottage as an embarrassment. The recordings were played in court, Veronica's voice echoing through the room. "We can't let people like her think they can live however they want. It's a domino effect. One messy yard, one ugly car, one garish birdhouse, and soon the whole community looks like a slum." Sarah's heart pounded as she listened, her anger flaring at the contempt in Veronica's words. The courtroom was electric with tension, the gallery buzzing with whispers. Veronica's face was ashen, her hands trembling as she gripped the table. Gregory Holt scrambled to object, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, but his arguments fell flat against the weight of the evidence. Judge Hayes ordered an immediate investigation into the HOA's practices and dismissed Veronica's lawsuit against Sarah with prejudice. Sarah's countersuit was allowed to proceed, with a promise of a full hearing on the harassment and damages claims. The judge also warned Veronica and her lawyer that the investigation could lead to criminal charges, including fraud, extortion, and possible embezzlement. Veronica's composure shattered. She stared at the floor, her hands trembling, her perfect facade crumbling. Gregory Holt's objections grew frantic, but Judge Hayes silenced him with a sharp look. "I've heard enough," she said. "This court will not tolerate abuse of power." As the gavel fell, Sarah felt a rush of relief, but the victory wasn't complete. David warned her that the investigation would take months, and Veronica's lawyer was already working to minimize the damage. Sarah left the courtroom with a mix of hope and unease. She'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. Outside, she called Mrs. Alvarez to check on Lily, her voice shaking as she said, "We're okay. I think we're going to be okay." She stood in the courthouse parking lot, the autumn breeze cool against her skin, and let herself breathe for the first time in weeks. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lot, and Sarah felt a flicker of something new, hope, yes, but also pride. She'd stood up to a bully and lived to tell the tale. In the months that followed, Sarah's life became a whirlwind. The local news picked up the story, and a reporter named Carling Gwynn began digging into Veronica's past. What she uncovered added a layer of complexity to the woman Sarah had come to see as a villain. 9 years earlier, Veronica had lost her husband, Michael, to a sudden heart attack. The loss had left her financially and emotionally adrift, her once comfortable life unraveling. She'd poured herself into the HOA presidency, finding solace in its rules and routines. Her obsession with control wasn't just about appearances, it was about survival, a desperate attempt to hold on to something when everything else had slipped away. Carla's article revealed that Veronica had once been a devoted wife and community volunteer, organizing charity drives, neighborhood picnics, and even a book club. But grief had twisted her into someone who saw every imperfection as a threat to her fragile world, every neighbor as a potential enemy. Sarah didn't forgive Veronica. The woman had tried to destroy her life after all. But she understood the desperation that could drive someone to such extremes. It made her reflect on her own journey, how she'd fought to escape poverty, how she'd sacrificed for Lily. She remembered the nights she'd cried herself to sleep in their old apartment, wondering if she'd ever give her daughter a better life. She remembered the fear of failing, the weight of being everything to a little girl who deserved the world. She and Veronica were two sides of the same coin, both fighting for control in their own way. The difference was that Sarah had chosen to fight with truth, not intimidation. The community's response was electric. Neighbors who had once cowered under Veronica's rule began speaking out. At a town hall meeting organized by Clara in the community center, the stories poured out. The Patels, an elderly couple, shared how they'd paid $5,000 in fines for a non-compliant mailbox, only to learn it was legal. The Garcias, a young couple with a toddler, described being pressured to sell their home after refusing to remove a basketball hoop. Javier, a single dad, told of a $3,000 fine for planting a vegetable garden, which Veronica had deemed unsightly. Clara spoke of paying a $2,000 fine to avoid a lawsuit over her unapproved porch swing. Mrs. Kim, a retiree, shared how she'd been fined $4,500 for planting roses that weren't on the HOA's approved list. Mr. Thompson, a young teacher, revealed he'd been fined $6,000 for parking his motorcycle in his own driveway. A single mother named Elena shared how she'd been fined $7,000 for a non-compliant shed where she stored her son's soccer gear. The stories were a tidal wave, each one a brick in the wall of Veronica's downfall. A petition to disband the HOA gained over 2,000 signatures, and Camden Estates voted overwhelmingly to replace it with a new transparent community board. Veronica resigned quietly, her reputation in tatters. Rumors swirled that she'd moved to a condo in downtown San Diego, far from the gated community she'd once ruled. Some neighbors pitied her, whispering about her loss and loneliness. Others cheered her departure, toasting to a neighborhood free of her tyranny. Sarah felt neither pity nor glee. She just wanted her life back. But the fight had changed her. She'd always been quiet, the kind of woman who kept her head down and worked hard, blending into the background of her own life. Now she felt a spark of something new, confidence, courage, a voice she hadn't known she had. The fight took its toll though. Sarah struggled to balance work, the legal battle, and time with Lily. She missed bedtime stories, school pickups, and the little moments that made motherhood her anchor. She'd come home exhausted, her diner uniform crumpled, and find Lily asleep, a new drawing tucked under her pillow. The stress triggered migraines and she started losing weight, her already slight frame growing gaunt. Her co-workers at the diner noticed her distraction, one of them, a gruff cook named Tony, slipping her extra coffee and a sandwich during breaks, saying, "You gotta eat, Sarah. You're fighting a war." Her manager, Linda, gave her flexibility with her shifts, sensing the weight she carried. But the guilt of those missed moments, those distracted days, weighed heavily. One night as she tucked Lily into bed, her daughter looked up with wide eyes. "Are we going to lose our house, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small but piercing. Sarah's heart broke. She hadn't realized how much Lily had picked up. She pulled her close, stroking her hair. "No, kiddo. We're not losing anything. Mommy's fighting to keep us safe." Lily nodded, but her eyes were still worried, and Sarah felt the weight of that worry like a stone in her chest. She vowed to shield her daughter from the worst of it, to make up for the lost time, to be the mother Lily deserved. The turning point came one evening when Lily brought home a drawing from school, a bright, messy sketch of their house, with Sarah standing in front, a red cape flowing behind her, Lily at her side holding a paintbrush, their marigolds blooming in the background. "You're my superhero, Mommy," Lily said, her smile bright as the sun. Sarah's eyes welled up. She wasn't a superhero, but for Lily she'd be whatever she needed to be. She hung the drawing above the kitchen table, a reminder of why she was fighting, not just for a house but for the life she'd promised her daughter. Sarah also found unexpected allies. Mrs. Alvarez became a second grandmother to Lily, baking cookies and sharing stories of her own battles with the HOA. Clara's coffee meetups grew into a weekly gathering, where neighbors shared their experiences and planned for the new community board. Javier offered to help Sarah fix her porch, his quiet kindness a balm to her stress. The Garcias invited Sarah and Lily for dinner, their toddler giggling as she smeared spaghetti sauce on Lily's cheek. Mrs. Kim brought over rose cuttings, teaching Lily how to plant them in the backyard. Mr. Thompson's art club showcased Lily's drawings, now framed in the community center alongside murals from other kids. Elena, the single mother, started bringing her son to play with Lily, their laughter filling the backyard. These connections, forged in the heat of the fight, gave Sarah a sense of belonging she'd never felt in the neighborhood. The group chat she'd started, The Resistance, buzzed with stories, strategies, and the occasional meme poking fun at Veronica's rhinestone-clad dog. It wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a community, a family. The countersuit settled out of court 8 months later. The HOA, under pressure from the investigation, agreed to pay Sarah $50,000 in damages for emotional distress. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to fix the porch, repaint the house, replace the creaky front door, install a new fence for Lily's backyard, and start a college fund for her daughter. Sarah also used part of the money to buy Lily a new set of paints and a sketchbook, a small gesture to thank her for being her anchor. She paid off a lingering medical bill from a year earlier, when Lily had caught pneumonia, and bought herself a new pair of shoes, her first in 3 years. Most importantly, the settlement was a vindication. Sarah had stood up to a bully and won, not just for herself but for every neighbor who'd been silenced by fear. The investigation into Camden Estates bore fruit. The district attorney's office found evidence of fraud, misappropriation of funds, tax evasion, and even forged documents, leading to criminal charges against Veronica and 3 board members, Richard, Margaret, and a treasurer named Susan. The HOA was ordered to refund over $250,000 in illegal fines to dozens of homeowners, some of whom had moved away but were tracked down by David's team. The new community board, led by Mrs. Patel, focused on inclusion and transparency, hosting open meetings, publishing financial records online, and organizing community events. A neighborhood cleanup day where kids painted murals on community walls, a potluck where Mrs. Alvarez's cookies were the star, a basketball tournament at the Garcias Hoop, a book fair organized by Mr. Thompson. Camden Estates was no longer a fortress of rules and intimidation. It was a neighborhood, messy and human, full of people trying to live their lives. Sarah's house became a gathering place, its sturdy blue porch a stage for laughter and stories. Neighbors brought casseroles, invited her to barbecues, and thanked her with small gestures. A bouquet of marigolds from Clara, a homemade pie from the Garcias, a hand-carved birdhouse from Javier to replace Lily's non-compliant one, now painted with stars to match her drawings. The Garcias, who'd nearly lost their home, stopped by with their toddler, who clung to Sarah's leg in thanks, her tiny hands sticky with candy. Mrs. Kim brought rose cuttings, planting them with Lily in the backyard. Mr. Thompson framed one of Lily's drawings for the community center, where it hung alongside murals from other kids. Elena's son Diego became Lily's best friend, the two of them chasing fireflies in the backyard until dusk. Mr. Patel, now a board member, asked Sarah to join as an advisor, citing her courage as an inspiration. She hesitated, she was still just a waitress, still just Sarah, but she agreed, wanting to ensure no one else faced what she had. One evening, as Sarah and Lily sat on the newly painted porch, eating ice cream and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lily turned to her mom. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" she asked, her voice steady but searching, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Sarah pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her daughter's small body. "Yeah, kiddo. We're safe. And we're strong." She looked out at their little yard, the clover still sprouting defiantly among the grass, the marigolds blooming in a riot of yellow and orange, the new birdhouse swinging in the oak tree. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And no one could take that away. Inside, Sarah felt a quiet triumph. She'd fought for her home, her daughter, her life. She'd found a voice she hadn't known she had, one that echoed beyond her own walls. The neighborhood had changed, but so had she. She wasn't just Sarah Miller, single mom and waitress. She was Sarah Miller, the woman who'd taken down an HOA and built something better in its place. A community where people looked out for each other, where courage was stronger than fear, where a little girl could paint her birdhouse any color she wanted. 3 years later, Sarah stood at a podium in the community center, facing a packed room of neighbors at the 4th annual meeting of the new community board. She'd been invited to speak, a role she'd accepted despite the butterflies in her stomach. Her hands trembled as she gripped her notes, but her voice was steady, stronger than it had ever been. She told her story, The letter that had shaken her world, the fear that had kept her up at night, the fight that had brought her here. She spoke of the neighbors who'd come forward, their voices joining hers to tear down Veronica's empire. She spoke of the community they'd built, one where kids played in the streets, where neighbors shared meals and stories, where no one lived in fear of a clipboard and a fine. She spoke of Lily, her anchor, her reason for fighting. She spoke of the letters she'd received from strangers across the country, thanking her for giving them the courage to fight back. She ended with a simple truth: we're stronger together. And no one, gets to bully us into silence. The room erupted in applause, not just polite but heartfelt, a wave of gratitude that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She stepped down, shaking hands and accepting hugs from neighbors who'd become family. Mrs. Patel pulled her aside, her eyes shining. "You've changed this place, Sarah," she said. "You've changed us." Clara handed her a cup of coffee, her smile warm. Javier gave her a nod, his quiet pride speaking volumes. The Garcias toddler, now a preschooler, ran up, offering a crumpled daisy from the community garden, now a sprawling patch of roses, marigolds and Javier's vegetables. Elena and Diego joined them, Diego high-fiving Lily as they planned their next backyard adventure. Sarah's story rippled beyond Camden Estates. Carlin Nguyen's article had gone viral, picked up by national outlets, and Sarah was invited to speak at homeowner advocacy conferences in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. She shared her story with thousands, her voice growing stronger with each telling. She started volunteering with a legal aid group, helping families navigate HOA disputes and property laws. She'd sit at kitchen tables, just as she had with David, listening to stories of intimidation and offering guidance. Her name became a quiet legend, a beacon for those who felt powerless. She received letters from strangers, homeowners in Texas, Florida, Oregon, even Canada, thanking her for inspiring them to fight back against their own HOAs. One letter, from a single mom in Ohio, read, "You showed me I don't have to be afraid. Thank you for giving me my voice back." Another, from a retiree in Arizona, said, "Because of you I kept my home. You're a hero." Back home, Camden Estates was no longer a gated fortress. It was a neighborhood, alive with potlucks, kids playing in the streets, and neighbors who knew each other's names. The community garden flourished, a testament to Mrs. Kim's roses and Lily's marigolds. The basketball hoop at the Garcias house was a magnet for kids, including Lily and Diego, who'd become inseparable. Mr. Thompson's art club showcased Lily's drawings, now framed in the community center alongside murals from other kids. The community center hosted movie nights, book fairs, and even a talent show, where Lily performed a skit about a superhero saving her home. Sarah's house, with its sturdy blue porch and slightly uneven lawn, stood as a testament to what was possible when you refused to back down. She'd defeated Veronica, but more than that, she'd defeated the fear that had once held her back. One night, as she tucked Lily into bed, Sarah looked at the drawings taped to her daughter's wall, bright, chaotic sketches of houses, trees, and superheroes. A new one hung in the center. Sarah, with a red cape and a fierce smile, standing in front of their cottage, Lily at her side holding a paintbrush, their marigolds blooming in the background, the new birdhouse swinging in the oak tree, stars painted on its sides. "You're my hero, Mommy," Lily murmured, her eyes heavy with sleep, her voice soft but certain. Sarah smiled, her heart full. "And you're mine, kiddo." She turned off the light and stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against her skin. The stars were bright above her little house, and the neighborhood was quiet, alive with the soft hum of life, crickets chirping, a neighbor's laughter, the distant bark of a dog that wasn't Duchess. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly at home, not just in her house but in herself. She'd fought for her place in the world and won, not just for herself but for everyone who'd ever been told to stay quiet. Her victory wasn't just a house saved or an HOA dismantled. It was a legacy of courage, a spark that would light the way for others. As she looked out at the neighborhood, now vibrant with possibility, Sarah knew that legacy would endure, a quiet promise that no one could take away.